This is chapter 1 of preschool appropriate practices, the self-directed learning environment. Here we go. Here are the learning objectives. By the end of this chapter, you will understand the expectations of students and teachers in the preschool classroom, which is great because hopefully you will be in a classroom someday. We will discuss and appreciate what we know about teaching and learning. We'll review the early childhood research base and identify its impact on the preschool classroom. We will be able to describe developmentally appropriate practice and explain its importance, and understand and apply early childhood program criteria as outlined by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and explain the importance of and know how to create a self-directed learning environment. So, what are the expectations of children and teachers in a preschool classroom? Well, this is a new experience, right? For most kids, going to preschool or a daycare center is their first event where they're away from home on their own, really, right? Not on their own, but without their parents. So, this is something that kids are learning how to do as they do it, right? When you think about fifth graders, they're not learning how to do school or how to be away from home. They learned that already, right? So a base foundation of what we're doing is teaching kids what it's like to be away from home, away from their parents. We're going to talk about the hows and whys of learning and appropriate practices in the curriculum too. So what do we know about teaching and learning? We know that a teacher in an early childhood classroom is a guide or facilitator of learning. So we're not spending our time doing that direct teaching stuff. We're not saying, now sit down and everybody do this. We are putting together an atmosphere of learning, of discovery, of exploration, so that children can go and experience and learn through play, like we always talk about, right? So a rich environment full of materials, and we are observing how they interact with the environment around them. And again, when we're talking about a learning environment, especially in preschool, daycare, early childhood, we're not just talking about the physical environment. We're not just talking about the desks and the toys. We're talking about the environment, the relationship that you have with children, the schedule that you have. All of these things are the environment. The early childhood research base is what we know about how kids understand things. We talk again in those domains, developmental domains of physical domain, logical, mathematical, we'll call that, sometimes it's called cognitive development. And then social, emotional, or social conventional knowledge. The things that we need to do in our programs, in our preschools, is to develop a way for children to construct their own knowledge. So they're experiencing things and they're figuring out how that works, right? Exploratory play, like we talked about. So children are playing, and that's how they learn. And caregivers are helping children learn these skills. Developmentally appropriate practice. If you haven't had a class with me before, you may not have heard of developmentally appropriate practice, but basically it means this. Is the thing that I'm trying to do with these children age appropriate? Does it understand how children develop? Am I trying to get a 3-year-old to tie their shoes? If I am, it's probably not going to work because a 3-year-old doesn't have the cognitive development, the understanding in their brain, or the fine motor skills to tie shoes, okay? Is it individually appropriate? Does this child have the development to do this thing? So it may be a child who has, let's say, speech development issues. Am I trying to do something that is beyond what their development is? And then culturally appropriate. Is this thing that we're doing appropriate for all the children and all the cultural backgrounds in my classroom? So am I talking about Christmas in a classroom where maybe not everyone celebrates Christmas? What should I be doing so that this is a culturally appropriate activity? We're going to talk about the state learning standards. And in fact, I'm going to show you, this is the learning standards for preschoolers in Illinois. This will be a link in Cobra so that you can get to all of these things. And you're going to need this a lot as you create your activity plans. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And we want to use those learning standards. We want to also understand our developmentally appropriate practice when we are setting our learning objectives. Okay. A self-directed learning environment means a place where children can easily see what's available for them to do. They can make their own choices about what they want to do, and they can get deeply involved in their own learning. So a self-directed learning environment would have things that are labeled so that kids can see, oh, this goes there. It gives them time in the schedule to do free play so that they can decide where they want to play in the classroom. And it gives enough time in the schedule for them to get deeply involved. So you're not going to be switching activities every 15 minutes, right? And you're going to have things like the physical environment is arranged in such a way that you have centers that need more quiet, focused activity away from centers where it's big, loud craziness, right? So talking about centers, the environment in your classroom, and you can see in this picture, you can see a dramatic play center back in the back. It looks like there's some sort of market or something. This looks like it might be a water table or a sand table. So that might be the science center. I can't tell if that's music or I don't know. Oh, it's a cash register. So that might be some dramatic play too. And then probably in there somewhere, there's an art center and a blocks center. So it gives them a place to go within the classroom. And it is a lot of times these are sort of have boundaries so that you feel like this is the place where I know that I play with blocks, right? And then your day should have times when kids can make their own choices and spend as much time as they can focused on an activity. Oh, here's a good floor plan. So we see there's a music area, and probably along here we store the music stuff. Dramatic play. We've got a kitchen. It looks like some dolls, some baby dolls, so you can play house. I think it's also important to have, and it looks like these are dress-up clothes. It's important to also have other dramatic play areas that aren't just playing house, a tool set or a grocery store, or, you know, and as kids get older, you need to change those things out more often because they get bored, but leave it, you know, for a quarter or a semester or whatever. Here's an art area with art supplies that are readily available. Easels are always out and ready to use. A science center, probably weights and measures and bugs and magnifying glasses and that kind of stuff. A writing center, a quiet center for book reading. A computer center. I go back and forth on computer centers in a preschool classroom, and I'll talk about that later. A manipulative or math center. Because in preschool, we don't do math with worksheets and calculators. We do math by touching teddy bear counters or sorting buttons or, you know, moving things from place to place and touching them. So a math center is going to have a lot of tactile activities. And then we have large motor. So that's moving around stuff. It doesn't seem like a big area for large motor in this classroom, but and of course, all classrooms are different and you have to set it up the way that works for you. And in addition to that, you need to change it up periodically. One of the things that I always did with my 4-year-olds who were in their last year of preschool before kindergarten, at the semester, we changed up the room completely. Those guys tend to get a little bit bored. They've been at school for probably 2 or 3 years at that point. They have like senioritis. They're ready to move on. So when they go off for winter break and then they come back to the classroom and it's all different, it gives them a way of re-engaging, exploring, and spending more time focused on what they're doing rather than just, you know, this is Oh, here I'm in the classroom again. So developing trust. So we know in the stages of development, children are looking to trust the adults around them. And as they're in school, they want to know that they can do the things that are expected of them. So you need to do things to help them. Give them name tags, put photos on their cubbies, put tags and photos on the storage places so that kids know how to put away, right? So that kids know where their stuff is. Okay. Trust in the teacher. That means that you need to be positive. You need to accept them. You need to understand, or at least attempt to understand, what they're thinking. Giving them time to get involved. As kids get older, as they get to be 3 and 4, they need more time. They need more time to just really dig into the things that they want to do. So spending 20 minutes in a center isn't going to be enough. You should be spending 45 minutes, almost to an hour. And if during that center time they want to move to a different center, that's fine. But give the kids who can focus for an hour when they're 4 that time. Showing delight when meeting child's parents. Kids need to know that, one, their teacher knows their parents and their parents know their teacher, because that's where home and school, the outside world, come together, and they want to see that there's a connection there. And parents, want to know what's going on in the classroom. And sometimes, especially with 3s, and sometimes with 4s, it's hard to get kids to talk about what they did at school for a couple of reasons. One, when you say to a kid, "Oh, what'd you do today?" Think of all the things that a 3-year-old did at school, right? So when you say, "What did you do today?" they're like, "I did so much. I don't even know where to start, so I'm not going to tell you," right? Secondly, when they're even a little bit older, what they do at school is kind of their thing, and maybe you're not there, so I'm not sure I want to tell you. So it's important to have a relationship with parents so that when you can send home a note, you can send home something that says to the parents, "Hey, this is what we did at school today," so that the parents can say, "Oh, Jason, I heard you practiced running at school today. How did that go?" Instead of saying, "What'd you do?" Right? Having a specific thing to think about. Refrain from correcting the child's speech. It's good to tell children a correct way to say something, but the way that you say it is really important. Not if someone says, "Oh, I goed to the store yesterday." Instead of saying, "No, it's not I goed, it's I went," you would say, "Oh, you went to the store? What did you get at the store?" So you're not saying, "Hey, you did that wrong." You're saying, "Here's a better way to do that." And another way to develop trust is to let them bring a toy from home. How can they develop trust between their peers? You helping them get into an ongoing play activity, saying, "Oh, look, Clara is interested in dinosaurs too, Brian. Could she play with you here?" Setting up a similar activity parallel to the group. So sometimes if Clara's a little nervous about going and playing with Brian right away, get some other dinosaurs and set them next to Brian and say, "Hey, Clara, I have some dinosaurs for you too." Asking them to perform a task that will include other children. In this case, you could say, "Hey, Brian, can you tell Clara a little bit about these dinosaurs that you're playing with?" Trust in the environment. Have similar materials to those at their homes. So what are some things that you could see in a kid's house that you might also have in the classroom? Homemade materials are always, when you can say, you can bring out a Ziploc bag of homemade Play-Doh and say, "Hey, I made this for you," right? That's awesome. Convey that this classroom cares for you. Putting up pictures of kids in the classroom and putting up their art shows them that they have a place there. This says overstuffed chair, but a private space, a comfortable space, a place where kids can go and be calm and a little isolated is sometimes helpful. Toys to borrow, if you're okay with that, and books for overnight home lending, if that works for you as well. So you want your place to be a dynamic setting for learning. You want learning centers that are responsive to individuals. You want teacher observations and an atmosphere of trust. There you go. It's chapter 1.